to make sure you're fully informed, or as fully informed as you can be, in terms of supporting your sons and daughters in the next really quite daunting but exciting step in terms of next steps. And the purpose of this evening is really a focus on university and where we're up to with students. And I'm just going to talk to you a bit about higher education first of all, and then Mrs. Roston will go into a bit more detail about the process and how you can support your child to in that process. So first of all, I'm sure some of you might be thinking, is higher education right for me? Why might I want to choose higher education? Obviously, one important, maybe important, might not be important, but I think will be important to many students, is the idea of higher education and graduate students will earn a significant amount more than non-graduates. And, you know, that's only one factor. But when we're talking about £11,000 per year over the course of a working lifetime, that amounts to quite a significant amount of money, and obviously is a potential lever in terms of one reason why students might want to go to university. Linked to that is the employment rates for graduates, and we're including both university and degree level apprenticeships here, are significantly higher than for non-graduates. So not only are you going to be earning more money, or your child and daughter will be earning more money, but they are more likely to gain employment. As you can see from the facts, again, I won't read them out in terms of the next thing. The majority of working age graduates go not only into employment, but go into high skilled employment, that's nearly threefold compared to students or individuals, who are non-graduates. The exception to that is the higher level apprenticeships, which we'll talk a little bit about later, which have an even higher employment rate, but it's unsurprising to hear that they are potentially even more competitive than university. So in terms of what we're doing at Post 16, I'm very proud to say that, you know, led by Mrs. Roston, we've got an excellent track record at helping our students to secure places at really prestigious high-level universities, and more every year helping students to obtain places at degree-level apprenticeships. Very proud to say that year on year, and emphasised again next year, the vast majority of our year 13 students last year won places at their preferred choice of university, either their first or second choice, and that's always well into the high 90s in terms of Penistone. The vast majority of our students get the university of their choice, either their first or their second choice. And our students currently in year 13, who obviously just finished their exams and are awaiting their results in the summer, are also holding really impressive places for universities and apprenticeships. And, you know, I think it's credit to Mrs. Roston and the work that she does that our record in terms of supporting students for UCAS was praised by Ofsted. Much more importantly than Ofsted, was praised by students, and we ask our students every year about feedback and how ways that we can improve. And in terms of the guidance for Post 16, every year it comes out really high in terms of support from students, and I think that's much more important than any external validation from external agencies, because obviously they are the students that are actually going through it. So what are the options in terms of Post 16? The vast majority of our students will go on to university, and the vast majority of them go on to study a degree, but we are seeing more and more diversity in terms of that. There are some students for whom they have particular barriers in terms of A-level. Some students, for example, who might do 2 A-levels for a vast range of reasons, who might go on to study university via an access or foundation course. We have some students that will go on to study alternative courses such as HNCs, but we're seeing more and more students really going down that line of the apprenticeship route in that sort of fourth bullet point, because apprenticeships, unlike as many of you, sort of the old perception of apprenticeships used to be, I think they were what potentially students did because they couldn't get onto other courses. That has really completely flipped and changed around now, and apprenticeships really offer some of the best opportunities for students in terms of providing them with an education, providing them with pay, but equally, importantly, providing them with a job afterwards. It's a difficult choice to make, and that's why we're starting with students now in year 12 about university, and the first kind of choice is about where to study. There are over 300 institutions just in the United Kingdom. The types of institutions vary, and the number of courses that they offer, again, just in the United Kingdom, is over 30,000. So when you think students had a choice of maybe 10, maybe not even that many subjects at GCSE. That's then broadened out a little bit more at A level, where you have a choice of 25, 26 subjects. We're now going from 26 to 30,000 courses. So it is really important that students do their research now, use Unifrog, which is the tool that we use in school, to really research what's out there. And Unifrog is a great a vehicle for helping them to do that, where they can multiple different ways of searching. But one example, they can type in the 3 A levels they do, and it will bring up dozens and dozens and dozens of typical courses that students with those 3 A levels do. That's obviously just the UK. We also have students at Penistone that go abroad to study, be that in Europe or in America. And again, we see more and more students looking at those kind of avenues, where there are even more institutions and even more courses that are available. So not sure how relevant this is, but this is the most popular UK degree courses at the moment. And it tends to stay relatively static, but there is a little bit of a change year on year. Subjects aligned to medicine, which obviously includes medicine and nursing and midwifery and things like that, is always the most popular degree course. And again, I won't read through the whole of those subjects, but you can see that they're sort of dominated by many of the subjects that you might expect. And obviously, in terms of popular UK degree courses, part of that is also driven by the number of universities that offer those degree courses and the number of places that they have as well. So once your son or daughter's kind of decided what they want to study, the next big question is where and which university. And again, there are lots of different universities, and the universities have lots of different facets, and there's no right or wrong. There's no best or worst university. I'm sure many of you have heard about Russell Group universities and things like that, and they would tell you that they are the best universities. But it's really about finding the right university for your son or daughter. And on there's lots of different mixes. So there's sort of established universities, more traditional universities, as opposed to more newer universities. I think a big thing for many students will be whether they want to be on a university campus, which is basically where all of the students are together. Usually the accommodation and all of the lecture facilities are all on the same campus, or whether they want to be in more city urban campus, where similar to Sheffield, where the accommodation and the buildings and everything like that are separate. I think the fourth one on there is and fifth one are big things for many of our students. Do you want to go to a university like, for example, Manchester University, where you're one of tens of thousands of students, or do you want to go to a smaller university where there are fewer students? And I think the big one on there is about home or away. We are very fortunate where we are placed in terms of Penistone, that we have some amazing universities on our doorstep. Obviously, we're not very far from Manchester, from Sheffield, from Leeds. We're really not that far from other great universities like Durham and Newcastle and places like that. So I think students do have a real difficult choice in some ways, that there are a plethora of great universities on our doorstep, and therefore it's important that they do that research. I'm obviously not naive to think that the sixth point on there is really important to students as well, because it's not just about education, it's about those life skills and developing all of those additional skills that are important. So what's available in terms of facilities, nightlife, accommodation, etc. And like I said, it really isn't one size fits all. It really is important that students make informed choices, and we encourage students to go to university open days. Since thankfully the end of COVID, more and more universities are now reopening face-to-face open days. Again, they're all advertised through Unifrog, but also individually, and we think that's a really valuable opportunity for students to go and see what a university is like. Equally, many universities, will also still have virtual open days, which are useful, but I don't think they're still as useful as going and getting that taste of what the city or the location's like. Many universities are also still offering and continue to offering subject taster days as well. So that's not just let's come and have a look around the university. What is studying biomedical science at Newcastle like? So you get a bit much more insight in terms of not just the university, but in terms of the course, because again, the course will vary massively. Doing a biology degree at a particular university what may be very, very different to doing the same biology degree at a different university. And therefore, it's really important that that research is done in terms of what does that involve at that particular university. So as I'm sure you're aware, you're probably familiar, or some of you may be familiar with the Russell Group set of universities. The Russell Group universities are a set of 24 universities who have a prestigious, I think that's fair to say, reputation for research and for academic achievement. And although they don't have specific entry requirements for the group, they tend to be the universities that fill the top end of the university league tables. A caveat to that is there are many different ways of measuring university performance, and they vary, well, they can vary quite substantially, and we would encourage students to look at those. I would particularly encourage students to look at student satisfaction. We talked about it earlier on in terms of Penistone. Yes, it's important to look at employment and average wage and things like that. But what are the students actually saying about studying X course at that university? Again, though, that doesn't mean the Russell Group set of universities are the be all and end all, and it's really important. There are some other universities outside of the Russell Group who are very prestigious, who offer very high quality degrees which open doors to students as well, and it's important that students find a course that suits them and at a university that suits them as well. Again, I'm obviously not going to read through all of that. You can see, if you want to catch up with this, we'll put this online, and you can have a look through the Russell Group universities at your leisure in terms of those that are members of the group. So where to study, then what to study? Again, really, and I'm summarising this and keeping this quite simplistic, there's sort of a broad split between vocational courses, teaching, nursing, midwifery, etc., which generally lead to a specific degree. Most nursing graduates end up as nurses, most teaching graduates end up as teachers, etc. But then there are obviously, opposite to that, I'm not going to say more academic courses, but more subject-based courses, which may be less likely to lead to specific jobs, but will develop skills relevant to future career courses. So throughout this year, in Wednesday and in enrichment, we have been putting on a series of careers courses for a massive variety of different courses, really encouraging students to sign up for them. And during those courses, we talk to students about the particular type of degrees, what they offer, employability. So, for example, I run one on social sciences, and we talk to students about what a degree in psychology, for example, ends up students doing. And in a subject like psychology, about 50 to 60% of students who study a psychology degree will end up doing something directly related to psychology. The other 40% of students will end up doing something where they've used those transferable skills that may not be directly related. And again, that's something to look at in terms of degrees. I think it goes without saying, in terms of the third point, it's really important that students pick something that they're going to enjoy, and also something that's going to be worthwhile for them moving forwards. And like we've talked about, and you can have a look at that website later on, there's lots of resources that are available to help students to try and guide them. So once students have made a choice, or their choices in terms of the universities and the courses, there will then be a whole set of entry requirements, and unfortunately, each university really is a law to themselves, and they will decide their own entry requirements for particular degree courses, and they potentially will vary quite a lot for some courses. For other courses, you might find quite more homogeny in terms of similar entry requirements. We really encourage our students at Penistone to be aspirational, and we think it's really important that, as throughout their 5 choices of university, they have a couple of aspirational choices, potentially a couple of more realistic choices in terms of where they're at the moment. But I should caveat that with, we've got a whole year of education left at the moment. On average at Penistone, which is completely different to the national average, our students make on average a grade progress between year 12 and year 13. Obviously that's an average, and different students progress at different ways. And then potentially a safer bet in terms of a course and with entry requirements that they think they're definitely going to achieve. Obviously, a good guide to that is their target grade. We set our target grades at Penistone on the top 25%. As many of you hopefully are aware, our results are often, well, every year in the top 10%. The last few years, they've been in the top 2.5%, which means that our students are, on average, not just achieving those top 25% aspirational target grades, but are actually well exceeding them. And although, you know, the year 10 progress grades are a good guide to that, we don't want students to be limited by that, because we've got a long way to go in terms of those final examinations. Once students have made their choices, they will then get offers from universities. And again, unfortunately, the offers that they get will vary depending upon the university that they've applied to and the course that they've applied for as well. Some universities will make grade offers, ABB, BBC, etc. Others will make tariff offers, and I'll talk about the tariffs in a moment. Usually, established, more traditional, potentially more prestigious universities will make high offers, and newer universities will make lower offers, although that is not necessarily the case for all degree courses. Really important, that final bullet point. We are seeing more and more universities including other things in their entry requirements that are not just their A levels. So, for example, it might be GCSE results. Really important that students, again, one of the reasons why we're doing this now is that students look at that now. So if, you know, that we might have a student, for example, who is really gifted in the sciences and has done really well in maths and their sciences and are doing those sciences at A level, and then they find that one of their requirements for their university course is they need a 6 in English and they've got a 5 in English. And it's important that they know that now, so we can then help to support those students. We've got English research lessons.
Somebody's got the microphone on, please. Would you mind muting it? Thank you.
So it's really important that students look at all those additional things as well. Equally, and we're also seeing more and more universities in terms of having their own entrance tests. A lot of them have gone online. Many of them are in October next year. So again, it's important that students are aware of that now, so we can start helping them to prepare and using the summer to prepare for those exams as well. And again, unfortunately, there is no one size fits all for that. It's about looking at individual individual universities and individual courses. So just in terms of the offer, this is just an example of the offer that students might get. This is physics at Sheffield University. So you'll be able to see for 25-26 entry, which is when students in year 12 will be going to university. It talks about AAB. Note that little bit about other entry requirements as well, but it also will take you links to lots of other things in terms of course fees and things like that, which we'll talk about later on. Students obviously can strengthen their application, and what universities, particularly those that are looking for competitive courses, will be looking at the other things that students can offer in terms of experiences they've had, in terms of reading, taster days and things like that. So as students now are starting to write their personal statements, it's important that they include all of that information on there, because that might be the difference between one student who's got, or two students, who have got the same predicted grades, between one of them getting a place and potentially one of them not doing. So there's another example. Nursing at Huddersfield talks about the different grades or potentially UCAS courses for certain subjects. And the reason why we put this on here, like nursing, it's really important that students have the right attributes, being caring and compassionate and empathetic, and in some ways those attributes are more important than the grades that they end up getting in terms of the university. They will also need relevant work experience, and again, that's something that we can support students with in terms of finding. So last little bit for me, and then I'll hand over to Mrs. Roston about where we're up to with students at the moment. We talked about tariff points. Again, if you've got elder children who've been to university quite some time ago, these have changed quite a lot. So if you get an offer for 120 points, that's on average 3 Bs. The good thing about tariff points is obviously if it's 3 Bs and you get an ABC, then you haven't made those entry requirements, and then it would be at the university's discretion whether they would admit you or not. However, if it's 120 points, which is the equivalent of 3 Bs, and you make ABC, you will have made the tariff points and you will be guaranteed a place there. So again, just a little bit more complexity and something that has changed recently in the last few years. Brilliant. I'm going to hand over to Mrs. Roston now, who's going to talk to you about how students are applying and how you can support them with next steps. Thanks, Miss.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Mr. Stevens. So at the minute, we are in the middle of starting the process with our Year 12 students. They've been doing this for about the last 6 weeks. Students have all made an account on UCAS, so you would be able to look at that with your son or daughter, and they've also done a first draft of their personal statement. Eventually their personal statement needs to be 4,000 characters including spaces. We've asked for a first draft of a minimum of 2,000 so tutors can start to give feedback and really start that process to getting a quality personal statement. Where young people decide they don't want to go to university, that personal statement will also form a suitable letter of application or expression of interest on an application form for a job or for an apprenticeship. So they track the whole application on UCAS from start to finish. The UCAS site itself is an amazing tool with lots of information on it, which you can look at. And there's a whole site, UCAS for Parents, that you can look at. And also as a school, we subscribe to Unifrog, which is an amazing site with information about universities, careers, vast amounts of content on there which you can access as well as your sons or daughters. So students are getting to the stage now where they've done this first draft and are getting ready for some feedback. With my form today, literally, they were getting over that line for that first draft out of the way. So Mr. Stevens has talked a little bit about normal offers. On top of this, some universities do offer what are called contextual offers. So a contextual offer is usually slightly lower and can be based upon students' individual circumstances. For example, if they didn't do the GCSEs at Penistone, they may have done them at a school with lower than national average GCSEs. It may be linked to things like parental income, if parents themselves didn't go to university, if a young person's been in care or is a carer. It can also be based upon postcode. Now, universities will look at the application once it's sent in and look for these markers, but sometimes there are things which won't be apparent, which is part of our reference that we share with universities. We can make universities aware of other things. So it's really important that young people are open with us and open with universities. Things will only ever be used to positively discriminate, not to negatively in any way. Even after the application's gone off, circumstances can alter for a young person. So it is important that if things do change that may impact upon this, we can let universities know later down the line. And that is something that I will regularly do. So there's lots been going on in school since students started. Most students are out on work experience, for example, next week or on the first Lineker Institute summer school. Students have had support in particular areas like medicine, vet medicine, and that will ramp up a lot more in the autumn term. A number of students have been successful in getting onto things like summer schools that they'll be doing over the summer holidays. And then on top of that, students can opt into some of the things that Mr. Stevens mentioned, like taster days. We went as a school to the UCAS conference about a month ago. On top of that, we do have lots of guest speakers coming into school. So the last assembly we had Newcastle University in, the assembly in the last week we've got Sheffield University in talking about choosing a course and giving some guidance on that. We're also fortunate enough to have dedicated time for tutorials, assemblies and enrichment, where lots of things are put in place then, many of which students opt to do. We're also fortunate enough to have a careers advisor who does have some time dedicated to post 16, but young people on top of that can sign up for careers appointments if at any point they feel that they need that. They're not limited to how many appointments they have. If they've already had 1, 2, 3, they can just keep signing up for another if they keep needing another. So a lot of the deadlines we're working with for UCAS are external to school. So if students are applying to either any of the early entry options, so that's medicine, veterinary medicine, dentistry and Oxford or Cambridge, there is an external deadline of the 15th of October at 6 p.m. Most of the universities, the deadline isn't till the end of January now. However, we do have internal deadlines in school. So 27th of September, we try to get students to meet that for early entry. Other university deadline, we do try and get all of those sent off before Christmas, unless there's a strong reason for students not doing that. The reason for that is we have mock exams after that 2nd of December deadline, and we tend to find that making these big decisions about university courses, about places to go, does weigh quite heavily on students. And I tend to see a real relief in young people once they're sent off. And you often find that the longer students wait, that they're no more certain than they were, a month before. It's just really procrastinating and going round in circles, quite often with no change of mind. So we do encourage students to get those sent off, and then they can concentrate on getting the grades that they're likely to need to take up these places. So, as I think Mr. Stevens mentioned, students have got up to 5 choices. The UCAS fee covers 5, so they might as well take all 5. When they put their choices on their UCAS form, they're not ranked in any way, and each university can't see where else students have applied. However, it is important that students are choosing, if not necessarily the same course at each institution, ones that are similar. They only have one personal statement, and it's quite difficult to look like an enthusiastic, firm candidate if you are applying for very different courses and your personal statement is written about one of them. Now, there are exceptions to this, and students can apply through something called a conservatoire alongside the normal UCAS, and can have a separate personal statement for this. But this tends to be for created subjects like things like music and drama, are through conservatoires. Every year we just get a small number of students who do this, so I tend to give individual advice to any student who that might be relevant for. So UCAS is charged through parent pay. We don't make any profit on that. £28.50 is what it is. We take that off parents and then via parent pay, and then we get billed as a school, and we do need to get that paid before we can send it off. If students are in receipt of bursary, that will be paid by school. So as Mr. Stevens has already mentioned, students will get offers based upon grades or points. Unfortunately, they can sometimes get rejections, particularly if they are applying for very competitive subjects, particularly in areas like medicine and dentistry in Oxford and Cambridge, or where students are applying for things and they've either studied the wrong subjects to be eligible for that course, or they haven't got the predicted grades that they would need, or near to that for that course. Now, mostly students get all of their offers and will make a firm and insurance choice by the beginning of May, quite often well before then. The benefit, if students know what they want to do, of making that choice sooner than that, is that if they're moving away from home, they will get more choice of accommodation if they do that a little bit earlier. So A-level results day for this cohort is the 14th of August 2025, and then on that day, if they've got a firm choice, that will turn into their unconditional offer. If students don't get the grades they want, or have changed their mind come results day, they can use something called clearing to look at what courses are still available, or they can opt not to go at all or apply the year after. There is lots and lots of flexibility within that university offer. One of the things which is becoming less common, I'm pleased to say, is unconditional offers. These are unconditional offers, so students are offered a place at a university, whatever their A-level grades. So they're not popular with schools because it can lead to students taking the foot off the gas and really thinking, oh well, I've got in, I don't have to worry about it. But ultimately, young people will quote their A-level grades on applications, well, for the rest of their life, basically. I think a lot of universities have realised that this is not the way to go, and it's not getting young people through the doors with the right work ethic. So it's becoming much less common than it was 5 years ago. It's a different thing to get an unconditional offer where you have already got your grades, for example, if you apply a year late, and then that is perfectly reasonable. If somebody accepts an unconditional offer as their firm or first choice, they won't have an insurance, because that is where you would be going unless you change your mind. I'd also be very wary of unconditional offers that have got rules attached to them. For example, we'll give you an unconditional offer if you make us your first choice. I mean, that is fine if you've got lucky and that happens to be genuinely your first choice, but I wouldn't be swayed into changing your mind about what you wanted to do just because they're giving it you at lower grades. We really encourage students to really go with following their dreams and what they really want to do, and aiming high. So just a short mention of Oxford, Cambridge medicine, dentistry and vet medicine. We do get a reasonable number of students apply for these courses and do enjoy way above average success in these courses. Students can only apply to either Oxford or Cambridge. Once they've chosen which one, if indeed they are applying for one of these, they can only apply for one course there. If young people are applying for medicine, vet medicine or dentistry, they can only go 4 choices out of their 5 for that. And then their 5th has to be something different, but I would say related. It's usually something like biomedical science, something that relates to the science of medicine is a normal 5th choice. We had a student who, a few years ago, whose 5th choice was engineering at a really competitive university, and they got a quick rejection for that because obviously his personal statement was all about medicine. For certain degrees like medicine, work experience is absolutely essential, and you won't get away with not doing that. So set in stone, the deadline for these courses when we have to send it off by is the 15th of October. Now, students can add choices in for other courses or other universities after that deadline and by the normal deadline. They don't have to have the whole lot off by then, but they do have to bear in mind that the same personal statement will go to all of the universities as and when they add them in. If young people are applying for things like the ones I've just mentioned, they will almost certainly need to do an entrance exam. A lot of these are done online now. For example, the UCAT and the LNAT, which is for law, are done online. Students apply for that online, and they are sat at the same centres where theory driving test is done. But I would recommend anything like that, applying for it, get it done now so that you've got your choice of date. There are a smaller number that are done in school. So students would just express an interest in doing that in September, and we'll make sure that that is sorted out for them. Admissions tests are very different to anything students have done in school, so it is really important that they do lots of practice tests for those. So if young people do not wish to go to university, we still ask them to make the original registration on UCAS to keep their options open. Every year we have students who say they are not going, who change their mind, and if they do it very last minute, it can be really difficult getting everything done. Also, it's a good way doing the early UCAS of getting things like a personal statement, getting all the qualifications dug out and in one place so they've got that information ready. But I would suggest that if people are definitely not wanting to go to university, they need to look at having a careers interview early on next year. And any sessions that we run in school that are aimed at supporting people applying for apprenticeships, they do need to be attending those. They might also want to consider the type of apprenticeship they're applying for. Even if somebody's looking for a degree level apprenticeship, it might not be that they're able to get from the off. I would also suggest that students have a good CV ready and just begin looking at what's available. So apprenticeships have changed an awful lot over the last 5 or 10 years. An apprenticeship is definitely a really viable alternative now for ambitious young people who, you know, want to do well and get on. So an apprenticeship will last a minimum of 12 months, and it's a paid position. You are employed by a company rather than seen as being a university student. At the end of it, you should be able to achieve a qualification that's recognisable in that job area. There are a number of different qualification types or apprenticeship types. I would suggest that the most common ones for people to look at after A levels would be from level 3 and above. Though level 3 is only equivalent to A levels, which young people will already have by the end of their A levels, if they are going into a very different area to anything they've studied, they might need to start at that level and work their way up. And it is very, very competitive getting straight in at the degree level standard for an apprenticeship. And sometimes people do a higher degree, and if that goes well, the company will then sponsor them to go on to do a degree. Once they've done the sort of foundation degree, the higher level apprenticeship, it can lead to a degree level apprenticeship. So there are lots and lots of apprenticeships out there. There are some things that you can't do an apprenticeship in, but these are ones that are very common in things like business, digital media, a lot of healthcare, apprenticeships now in things like law, public sector. There are a lot in things like retail. But it's worth having a look, and certainly the new ones are appearing all the time, and it's definitely worth looking to see whether there's anything that catches their eye with that. It's not uncommon for students to be torn between an apprenticeship and university, and there's nothing wrong with applying for both and deferring that decision until sometimes even after people have finished year 13 before they make that final choice, because it is such a big decision. So specific support for apprenticeships. So even though they're becoming more popular, the vast majority of our students do still go to university. So a lot of the apprenticeship help is done in small groups. In year 12, we have had things like whole assemblies informing students about apprenticeships, but we take the measure that by the time it gets to the start of year 13, some students are definitely set on going to university, so really need to concentrate on that and work on that. So what we tend to do is start putting on small group sessions for people who are interested in apprenticeships, and looking out for things like we do have speakers in school from companies who do provide apprenticeships. We tend to put those on after school to avoid students needing to miss a lesson. But certainly Helen Blakeman, who's our careers advisor, is a really good person to get an appointment with early on in September and really start to get some support from her on that. So a number of students choose to take a gap year. Gap years can be done in several different ways. If a student is 100%, they could fill in their UCAS form now for 2026. They could apply now and then on results day let universities know they want to defer. This works for most courses, but things like medicine, where you need to do an exam, an entrance exam in that year, they don't let you do that. They'll let you apply for 2026 in advance, but not sort of defer on results day. Or students can not apply at all and apply after they've left. That certainly the second one is the most flexible, and because it's not unusual for students to be positive they're having a gap year, but then when it comes down to it, change their mind and decide they want to go. If they decide they want to go last minute on results day and haven't yet applied, they've basically got whatever's left in clearing, which might not be their first choice that's available there. So, what can you do as parents and carers at this time? Please encourage your sons and daughters to attend session, to sign up for things like open days and visit open days, and do, you know, keep the chatting with them about it. It's not unusual for students to start getting quite stressed about all this, and it's again not unusual for people to not to think about it because it's too difficult and the decisions are too big. But we do tend to find where students do that, that tends to lead to a lot more panicking down the line. There's a really useful link there, and we'll share this on the website to the UCAS guide for parents and guardians, which is really helpful for talking you through it all as well. So where students are at the minute, that they're at the stage where they're researching everything online. They've got search tools on choosing courses, choosing universities. One good thing from our point of view that did come out of COVID is lots of universities got loads of virtual resources prepared to use at that time that are still available. So it's worth having a really good look at all that. Certainly, if they are thinking of going to university, I would strongly recommend going to open days. There will be a number more in the autumn term, just to get a feel for what the city's like. I can remember my own niece going to an open day at Exeter University, literally getting out of the car and straight away saying, I don't like it, it's not for me. And she finished up going to Newcastle, which is a very different type of city to Exeter. And sometimes it's just the whole feel of the place a person needs to get. And it's even things like, how long is it going to take to get there? What's the feel? Where will I live in relation to the university? And if it's at all possible, I would strongly recommend visiting and just being as informed as they possibly can. We do our best as post-16 staff, and that we've got the tutors and other members of staff that work with the students. We do our best to inform them as much as possible. But as Mr. Stevens said, there are tens of thousands of courses at lots of institutions, and the rules for which are changing all the time. So, for example, entrance exams have changed loads this year, and keeping up to speed with everything can be it's impossible with the rules changing all the time. So it's really important that any course that they are thinking of applying for, that they are doing some of their own research, and then by all means do come for more help. In September, when we come back, I start putting up appointments for people to sign up for 20 minutes appointments with me to get some one-to-one advice, really. It tends to be early entry students doing that first, and then everybody else feeding into that. I've also, supposed to skip past it. So also, final thing, I don't know why it didn't come up as a slide, some useful websites for you and your sons and daughters to have a look at. One of the things on there is there is one university league table. Sometimes I take them with a pinch of salt. It's up to a young person to decide what suits them and what's best for them. But university league tables can be one way of looking at how popular a particular course is. So one area that is of particular interest for students and parents is student finance. So we're really fortunate tonight to have Chris Stead from Sheffield University here to talk to you about student finance. So I'm going to pass over to Chris to talk to you about this.
Lovely, thank you. And yeah, thank you for your time this evening. It's lovely to speak to you all. So hopefully you can all see that. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Got my slide on there. Perfect. Okay, so what I'm going to try and do over the next few slides, for the next sort of 20 minutes or so, is just talk through the student finance process, what it looks like, how everything works, and hopefully try and maybe answer some of the questions that you may have around the student finance system. There's a couple of caveats before we kind of get into all the detail. All the information that you see in this presentation is taken from the Student Finance England website. And if you do have any individual circumstances that you think aren't being answered in this presentation, that's probably the website to go to, because they have a huge frequently asked questions part of their website where they kind of answer all those individual circumstances questions as well. All the data, all the sort of facts and figures are taken from that website. They're not updated yet for 2025 entry. So all the figures are based on current 2024 entries. So you might find that in 2025, some of the figures are slightly different to what I'm presenting today, but usually around about February, March time next year, they're all updated on the website. So you should get a good, more accurate picture. So just to kind of cover some of the basics to start off with, as you're probably aware, university, whichever university you decide to go to, every university will charge tuition fees, and the maximum fee that universities can charge at the moment is £9,250 per year. In addition to that, there may be some additional what we call maintenance costs. So that might be things like accommodation, any particular course or study materials that you might need. Obviously, if you're in and around campus, or particularly living on your own, buying your food and drink, doing your weekly shop, and then obviously all the additional social activities as well. So the good news is there is support from central government through this, as I mentioned, through Student Finance England. And the first element of support that is available is what we call a tuition fee loan. And as the sort of label suggests, this element of the loan is there to cover that full amount of that tuition fee in each year of that degree programme. So that loan will always cover that full cost. In future years, that tuition fee could go up. So central government could decide that they want to raise that tuition fee cap. In previous years, when they have risen it before, it's usually been in increments of about £250. But that tuition fee loan will always rise to cover that full amount as well. So there should never be an issue where students have to contribute towards a sort of gap in what they're getting from their tuition fee loan. With this element of the loan as well, it's not based on a household income. So regardless of personal circumstances, everyone can apply for this tuition fee loan. And also, this tuition fee loan is paid directly to universities. A few years ago, this wasn't the case. It did get paid into student bank accounts, but as you can imagine, quite a few got quite excited that several £1,000s appeared, and some spent a bit too much of it. So now this goes directly to universities. The other element of support is slightly different, but it is another loan that students can take out, and this is what we call a maintenance loan. And as we mentioned a couple of slides ago, this can be to go towards some of the additional costs associated with the university, things like accommodation, bills, food, potentially social activities and things like that. This element of support is based on household income, so it's well worth maybe over the next few months just going on the on the Student Finance website and just looking at what kind of evidence you'd need to provide well in advance of when students start completing that application form. The amounts that students can apply for this maintenance loan is based on household income. And it's also based on where they will be living while studying. So hopefully on this next slide, I know that there's lots of facts and figures on this slide, but hopefully you can make sense of it. Down the left-hand side, we've kind of put some indicative household income thresholds on there. And then depending on whether the student is living at home or living away, you can kind of see there's a bit of difference there between how much they can actually take out. As that household income increases, the amount that students can apply for does decrease. But even right at the bottom, there is a minimum amount that all students can apply for, regardless of household income. As I said right at the beginning as well, these figures will probably increase for 2025 entry as well, because these are based on 2024. So when it comes to actually applying for student finance, students will apply through the Student Finance England Gateway. We'll put a little screen grab of that in the bottom corner there. That window usually opens about the first or second week in March. So once UCAS applications are out of the way by sort of end of January, students can sort of relax for a month or so. And then when March hits, that's when they start thinking about applying through student finance, should they be going down the university route. When that window opens, students are given several weeks to complete their application, so they don't have to turn it around straight away. There's usually a few weeks to complete the application. It's not as long as what the UCAS application is, but as I mentioned previously, there might be some additional evidence that as parents and guardians you may need to provide, particularly for the maintenance loan element of support. So it's well worth just looking in advance at what kind of evidence you need to provide for that. Student Finance England will also put out a deadline when students need to apply by, which I think last year was around about the 19th or 20th of May. So students are given a good 6 to 8 weeks to complete this. The reason why I'm mentioning that deadline and why it's so important is that student financing can guarantee that if students send their application off before that deadline, they will receive all their financial support in place by the time they start their course in September. If students apply late, or if they apply after that deadline, even by a day, that guarantee does disappear. If they have applied a day late, there's probably still a really good chance they'll get all their support in place, but it's not guaranteed. So I would encourage all students to make sure that they meet that actual deadline. There may be some issues where students get to results day in August and then decide that they want to change their course or change the university that they want to go to. Within the student finance application, they do need to declare a course and a university, which is probably going to be the one that they're thinking is going to be their first choice at that point. As long as they have met that deadline in May, they can just simply log back in at a later date and just simply change their course and university. As long as all the other details are all the same, particularly like bank account details where they're going to be sending the loans through to, there's no issue with sort of changing the course and university afterwards, so that can be done later on. So further down the line, when we start talking about student loan repayments, so we're going to skip ahead a few years and imagine that students have finished university and then they're starting to think about paying the student loan back. I want to kind of just spend a couple of slides explaining how that actually works. So when we talk about student loan, we are talking about the tuition fee loan and the maintenance loan. It might be that students only need to take out a tuition fee loan depending on personal circumstances, but it's usually one or the other or both. We wrap that up as the entire student loan. So students will only need to start making repayments in the April after they leave university. So just to put that into context, students that are finishing with us now, they've sort of got to the end of their final year, they don't need to start making any repayments until next April 2025. So there is a bit of a grace period. So obviously some students finish university, might want to spend a bit of time traveling or just building up a bit of work experience, or it may just take a few months just to get into full-time employment. So there is a bit of a gap there before they need to start making any repayments. The other important thing to remember is that students don't need to start making any repayments whatsoever until they are earning over £25,000 a year. So we call that the minimum salary threshold. Once students start earning over £25,000 a year, they will pay 9% of anything earned over that minimum threshold. And I'll show you some more information about that on the next slide. If students are earning under that threshold, so if they're earning 24,999, for example, there's no requirement to start making any repayments. And obviously salaries might fluctuate. So at one point they might be earning over 25,000 and then they might change jobs or take a gap year or something. So their earnings might drop below £25,000 a year. As soon as it drops below that threshold again, payments stop immediately. So it's important to remember those two things, and particularly for students that might finish university straight away, go into a full-time job where they're earning over that threshold. It's not until that following April when they need to start making repayments. So they're well within their rights to go to whoever sorts the payroll and say, hang on, I don't need to be paying anything back just yet. I want to start my repayments next April when it's due. It's also important to remember that as it is a loan, the interest is generated on the student loan as soon as the first instalment is paid, and interest will accumulate throughout the term of the loan. I've deliberately not put on an interest rate on this slide because over the past 2 or 3 years it has fluctuated a fair bit, and central government have put a cap on there to make sure that interest is not, becoming too high, because part of it is linked to the sort of retail price index. At one point that was over 10%, I think. So it looked like interest was going to be sky high, but they have fortunately put a cap on there. But it's well worth, when you're going through the application process, just have a little look at what the interest rate actually is at that point. It's also important to understand that anything that students have left to pay off when that 40-year period is up, everything that's left to pay is completely written off. So regardless of how much is left to pay after that 40 years, the rest of it is completely written off at that point. So as I previously mentioned, in terms of how much students need to pay back, repayments are calculated as 9% of anything earned above that minimum threshold of £25,000 a year. So hopefully the little table that we've kind of put on there illustrates the point that as annual income is increasing, we've got some different salary thresholds down the left-hand side. You can kind of see how the monthly repayment does increase down the right-hand side as well. Obviously, as soon as you look at that, you think, yep, my salary's increased, but maybe it's increased from 25 to 35,000 pounds a year. My repayments have jumped from £0 to £75 a month, which is obviously a decent jump. But the important thing to look at are the figures in the middle column, because again, it's all relative to what you're earning, and you can see how much difference there is in how much income is actually being earned on a monthly basis. Yes, your payments are increasing, but so is the amount that you are actually earning. So it is kind of nice that it is tied to your what you're actually earning, not what you actually owe. In terms of how you pay it back, the good news is it's all automated from the moment that you apply. Everything's kind of done online, and your individual payments are sort of managed by your future employer. So there probably will be someone in payroll. They'll calculate how much your monthly income is. They'll obviously calculate how much tax and national insurance you'll be paying, and also, if applicable, how much student loan repayments are. So again, if you're over that threshold, they'll calculate all that for you, and you'll probably be able to see on your monthly pay slip how much you've paid on your student loan for that particular month. Obviously, it does come out of your wages before the sort of final payment gets to you. So you might look at your monthly payslip and realise how much you're actually paying tax and national insurance. You'll probably stop doing that after the first couple of times you've looked at it. But yeah, there's not really anything that you need to do. You don't need to set up any direct debits. You don't need to be ringing call centres to make payments using your bank card. It is kind of all automated. For some of you, you may in the future be self-employed. You may start running your own business, which is great. It works in a similar way. It's the same minimum salary threshold of £25,000. But HMRC are very good at helping you work out how much you need to pay based on how much you've earned in that previous tax year. So when you complete your self-assessment form, which I think is usually towards the end of every January, you'll calculate how much you've earned in that tax year, how much tax you need to pay, national insurance, and also how much student loan. So it is kind of done on a similar thing. It's just kind of calculated in a different way. One question that we do get asked quite a bit, can you pay it off early? It is a loan, so absolutely. If you think it's in your best interest to pay it off early, maybe you've paid it off for quite a number of years and you've just got a small amount left to pay, and you think, yeah, I just want to get rid of it, absolutely you can. It is different to some sort of bank loans in that normally if you take out a bank loan and you pay it off early, sometimes they charge you a bit of extra interest for doing that, but with a student loan, they don't do that. So you can just pay it off in full, whatever it is that you owe. But again, this is entirely down to you. You manage that. If you want to pay it off early or you want to make overpayments, it's entirely down to you how you manage that. It's also important to remember that when I mentioned earlier about particularly the maintenance loan, depending on how much students can apply for, it may not cover the full amount that they need for that year. So depending on where they're studying, how much the accommodation is, what extra activities they want to get involved in, you may find that there's a bit of a gap there. What we always encourage students to do is to look at additional sources of funding. And what lots of universities do offer is offer things like bursaries. There are lots of scholarships available. I would encourage you all, as you're doing your research into different courses at different universities, just have a little look at what extra financial support you might be entitled to. I will mention something a little bit at the end about some additional bursaries, which I know Mrs. Roston alluded to earlier as well. But it's well worth looking at individual departments at universities, because occasionally they may have just a particular financial award just for that 1 year. It may be a previous alumni that's just come back and said, I want to contribute X amount of pounds for certain students to apply for to assist them through university. So really build that into your research, because there might be some additional financial awards that you might be entitled to that you didn't realise. Lots of universities have something similar to this. There's like a little funding calculator that you can find on lots of university websites. And just by putting in some very basic details like household income, your postcode, your predicted grades, things like that, it can give you a very quick indicator as to whether you may be eligible for a bursary or a scholarship, and potentially also how much that might look like. So again, that will probably take all of 30 seconds to complete, but it could give you a very quick indicator. So have a little look at that. I've seen that on a few university websites. So depending on where you're looking, you may be able to find that quite easily. So just to touch on some other sources of income as well, we've mentioned a little bit about bursaries and scholarships. If any of you are classed as disabled in any way, please make sure you include that on your UCAS application and also on your student finance application. That may entitle you to some additional financial awards as well. either through student finance themselves or potentially through the individual university that you are wanting to go to. So yeah, please make sure that you do declare anything like that on your application forms. In addition to that, the vast majority of university students do bridge that financial gap by picking up some part-time work. So lots of students, if their timetable allows, will pick up some part-time work on a weekly basis. Most universities are close to towns and cities where there's lots of sort of service level jobs, working in fast food industry or cafes, restaurants, bars, all that kind of stuff. Probably the biggest tip I would give to students is when you look at the university that you're going to, apply to be a student ambassador. The student ambassadors that we use are great, and they do lots of different kinds of shifts. Sometimes they'll do presentations with us like this. They'll attend lots of careers fairs. They'll work on open days. And it's really nice work as well. There's not a lot of preparation needs to go into it. And usually the rate of pay for ambassador work is pretty good as well compared to other part-time jobs. So wherever you decide to go, I can't think of any universities that don't employ student ambassadors. So please, please, please have a little look at that, because that could be a nice little earner along the side. I think I've mentioned most of the stuff on here. One little tip that I will mention is, depending on which university that you are thinking about going to, when you arrive for your first week, and normally the first week is Freshers Week, where there's lots of activities going on, you may be able to seek out some part-time work there. Maybe have a little look over the summer. If you're pretty confident that you know where you're going to be going to, just have a little look around the university, see if they're putting any part-time jobs on their website in the local town or city. You may be able to jump the queue and maybe pick out one or two of the better part-time jobs before everybody else turns up at the university in September and starts applying for the same jobs. So just have a little look in advance if you can, because you might pick up a nice part-time job by being a bit more prepared. And then just to kind of touch on something that Mrs. Roston alluded to earlier on, have a look at some of the different access programs that universities are offering. Again, wherever it is that you're applying to, every university will have some form of scheme like this. Ours is called Access Plus, other universities will call it something different. The criteria that you can see on the screen is pretty much the same at every single university that you look at. So if you look at one particular university and you think, yeah, just through my postcode, I qualify for this scheme, chances are you'll qualify at every other university that you're applying to as well. The only differences might be are the benefits that you'll get from it. So as Mrs. Roston said, it could mean that you get a contextual offer, so it might reduce the entry by 1 grade. But in particular, relating to sort of student finance, it probably will mean that you'll get awarded some kind of bursary. The bursaries could vary in terms of how much you might get. It could be anything from £100 to maybe a couple of £1,000 a year. So again, well worth just exploring this and build this into your research as well, because there are quite a lot of students, believe it or not, that don't think they're entitled to additional financial support. So they don't seek it out, they don't realize they're going to get it, and then they kind of miss out as well. So please just build that into your research when you're looking around different courses in universities. So that's pretty much it from me. I hope that's kind of cleared a few things up. Hopefully it's made some of the kind of application process quite straightforward, and how the repayments work and things like that. I'll stop sharing my screen, and then hopefully I've lost everyone. There we go. If there are any questions at all, please, yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions around that.
Thank you very much, Chris. Yes, I'd really like to thank you for coming in today. That's really informative for everybody. If anybody has got any questions now, we have got the chat that people can type questions in, or as Mr. Stevens mentioned at the start, if there is anything more specific about your own circumstances and you do need some, a more detailed personal chat about it, do feel free to contact us in school, and we will get back to you as soon as possible about that. But I don't know if anybody has got any questions they want to ask now. Okay, so that is the end of our presentation. Like I said, if you do feel free to stay in the chat and ask questions. Oh, is your hand up, Jacob?
Hi, it's Jacob's mum, Jo. I just
Oh,
wanted.
hi.
Hi there. One of the